it's been a few months since we saw you, and something exciting has happened. So please tell
Yeah, it's
us.
very exciting. One of the things that I said to the participants was that we were fighting for domestic workers to be covered by the New York City human rights law. There was an exclusion for domestic workers, which meant that, for example, if a employer found out that you were a lesbian, decided to fire you, that was okay if you're a domestic worker, not if you're any other worker in New York City, right? Or if your employer was sexually harassing you and you wanted to go to file a claim, you were not able to do that. That's something that we have been trying to change for a number of years. And finally, this year, we won coverage of New York City domestic workers by the human rights law. Very happy. We're going to be working this year on making sure that domestic workers and employers know about that and in starting to file claims to address some of those inequities. In addition, as a result of that, people in New York State heard about this, Jessica Ramos, and she introduced a bill the last session, the last week of the legislative session this year, and it passed. So domestic workers in New York State are now covered by the New York State human rights law. So I want to thank all the people who participated and made calls to the city council and support. And it just shows what all of us working together can do to bring about needed change.
It's kind of a dream result of a Lemlich Award. So I'm thrilled to be able to have you report that. Let's back up a little and talk about how you started on your path to being an activist. Was there one thing, or did you come by it honestly because it was in your family already? What would you say?
No, actually, my father came from an activist family, and my father was a musician. And my father always said to me that you should do something in the arts because getting into politics and causes is really difficult. And but I got a scholarship. I was a very good student. I got a scholarship to the New York State School of Industrial and Labor Relations at Cornell. And basically, I was saying to my father, don't worry, I'm not going to go into labor work or anything, but it's a way for me to get a Cornell degree. So I was first in my class in my freshman year, and David Livingston, the president of very progressive union, District 65 in New York City, always offered the person who was first in the class a summer job. So I got a job my first year, and they had I was working in the office, but they gave everyone who worked there, interns, the extended lunch hour to go out and do organizing. And I found out that I loved it and I had a talent for it. So the rest is history from when I was 18 years old on a summer job. Yes, I mean, one of the things that was really interesting about that was that I lived in Ireland for a number of years, and Ireland had just joined the EU, and the issue of pay equity was an issue in Europe before it became an issue in this country. And so I had been involved in the movement there. And when I came back, I kind of became like, one of the vanguard on the pay equity movement because I was aware of it and it was really just starting here. I think it's important to note that I was a union officer of 1199, which is now part of SEIU in Connecticut. And most of our members were women, including nurses. And they were state employees. We had just organized 7,000 state employees. And together with some other unions that represented women workers, I brought up the issue of nurses getting paid less than many of the male dominated jobs, and that we ought to be looking at whether or not people were being paid equitably. And we started a movement to do a study, and we got a firm from Washington State to come in and look at all of the state jobs And in fact, when we started to look at them, there was massive underpayment of women workers.
And
Um,
this study was fully funded by the union, or it was a
no, this
collaborative?
was this through discussions with the state, they agreed to do this study. So the
Fantastic.
study was
Mhm.
paid for by both parties, or might even, this was a long time ago, might have even been paid for by the state of Connecticut. So, and it took, a number of months. Then in negotiations, our union started to try to make gains to reduce the gap, which we were able to do, but to actually fund the results of the study was $40 million a year in underpayment of women workers. So it ended up that the Connecticut legislature had to do a budget item to be able to pay for that type of a increase for women. And so actually it took a few years, and in 1990, the legislature passed that funding. So it has been in existence all of these years. And I visited the union office in Hartford, Connecticut, through some work I'm doing now with the National Domestic Workers Alliance in Connecticut. And when I walked in, somebody said to me, "Oh, there's a meeting for our staff for state workers, and you're famous." And I was like, "What?" And they said, "Well, if you look at it now, it's over $1 billion that women workers in Connecticut have gotten as a result of that study." So, and that it was more than a study. That collaboration between women trade unionists from a number of unions to actually make that happen. And there was some demonstrations, et cetera. So, I don't want to make it seem like it was just this happened. There were a lot of people involved and a lot of activity in support of the work that we did when we were meeting and we were talking about, what are the skills, what's the responsibility of the job, what's the danger of the job, what's the impact of the work that you do, and how should it be compensated. So it's obviously something that I thought was a really very important thing that I've done in my life. But, just want to stress the idea that this happened in states where unions were strong, and we still have not addressed that issue. Women are, at that time, women were making 59 cents compared to every dollar. And I haven't been paying that much attention to it. I think it's in the high 70s or low 80s now, but
Yeah,
it's still not dollar for dollar. So we still have a way to go.
in terms of pay equity. Yeah, yeah. That's a huge gain. It's really remarkable.
The other issues that I've really been involved in have been childcare and work and family issues. I think so. Hopefully, right now we're looking on the federal level to try to get paid family leave. We have unpaid family leave, but in New York State we have paid family leave. Again, for people to recognize, it's because of the strong labor movement that we've been able to get that in New York State. And hopefully we can get it on the federal level. And then the whole question of childcare, which I and other women started to really work on in the 80s, is now recognized nationally as we've got to do something about childcare. It doesn't work. It's very expensive. It's not good for children if they don't have quality care, if they're sitting in front of a TV with a neighbor babysitter. And it's important for equality of children's education and opportunity. So it's another issue that I really worked on that I'm happy to see is now getting recognition as an issue that we really need to address for everyone, not just for people who have a union and the strength to be able to get that kind of benefit from employers.
Yeah, it's amazing. I want to go back to the pay equity, the beginnings of the pay equity um, story, and ask you, were there really people sort of protesting in the streets in order to get a study done? Is that how it worked? You
No,
said there had
actually,
to be pressure, and I wanted you to talk. That's one question, and the other one is, were the male union leaders unfailingly supportive of that.
No, no, they weren't. But um, we weren't looking at reducing the men's wages. So I think it's very important, right? Weren't saying that there's a fixed pot and we have to reallocate the pot. We're saying that women should be getting paid more. So again, that was something that was very important. But I want to say that at that time, there were a number of other states that were doing those studies. In other words, the idea of pay equity, there was actually a coalition of, I think, 7 or 9 states of women who were working to get their states to do pay equity studies. So again, it was kind of an idea, this time had come, that people were realizing that equal pay, when you say we have equal pay, since there is sex segregation in so many jobs, and we still have that today, that unless you were comparing unlike jobs with each other in terms of what they were getting paid, you were not really addressing the question of inequality. So yes, there was the national movement and national discussions on TV and in newspaper articles about 59 cents. So we were, and there was actually a national board of the National Committee on Pay Equity actually had a board. I was on it. So there was local work and there was national work, but I would say that it was more a question of forums and media and education about the issue than mass protests. Although I will say that in terms of our negotiations, when we were trying to make some inroads in it, we did actually have to have a sit-in in the Office of Management and Budget, the people who handle the budget, to get some more money into our contract. So it didn't happen without any agitation and any of that type of pressure. But again, I think that we sometimes forget about how strong the women's movement was and how much solidarity there was around women's issues during those early years of the women's movement. And so you had so many people talking about these kinds of things.
Which made all the difference. Yeah.
It made a difference. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. We're speaking to young activists with our Lemlich Awards. Do you have any advice for them?
Yes. If you know something is right or you know something is wrong that needs to be changed, don't give up. Keep on fighting for it and be relentless. I mean, that's what people sometimes say about me. They say, Debby, relentless king. And I would say that I would say 2 things. One is knowing that you can't do it by yourself. And one is never give up on the things that you know need to be changed. And even if it takes a while, the question of paid family leave in New York State, we started the coalition in the late 1990s, and we won it in 2018. We worked on that for 20 years, but it's made a tremendous change in people's lives that they can take paid time off when they have a baby, when they have a sick relative, et cetera. So know that change
the decades are worth it. Yeah.
Yes.
And do you know, I'm sure you do, how long the fight for domestic workers protections has been going on? You've been working on that for
a number of years, 5 years. But first bill was actually passed in 2010 in New York State for domestic worker rights. That really the discrimination and lack of coverage on labor laws for domestic workers, really vestiges of slavery, because when many of the labor laws were passed in this country in the 1930s and 40s, Southern representatives in Congress excluded both farm workers and domestic workers who were really the workers that they had had enslaved, and they did not want those people to be able to have the other rights. So it's been a very, very long struggle. Just interesting. Yesterday, I'm living now in Rhode Island, and I was in a museum of Irish history in
Huh.
Newport, Rhode Island, and I was looking at all of the discrimination against Irish women. No Irish need apply for domestic work. And so really many immigrant groups have been exploited for domestic work. And it is a women's issue because undervaluation of care work, cleaning, housekeeping work is part of
Mhm.
discrimination against women. So I'm very passionate about workers, and I'm very passionate about equality for women. And I'm very passionate about racial equality and equality for immigrants. So working now in my retirement for the National Domestic Workers Alliance is a really good fit.